For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin today in Brazil as the country's final round of presidential elections approaches. A new poll released Monday by Datafolha shows that challenger Aécio Neves' rejection rate continues to rise. That indicates the percentage of people who would never vote for him under any circumstance. Earlier this month, Neves' rejection rate stood at 34%, and now it has hit 40%. Incumbent President Dilma Rousseff's rejection rate has dropped slightly and currently stands at 39%. That's down from her previous rating of 43%. If the election were held today, the poll shows 52% of Brazilians would vote for Rousseff. Uruguayans are also preparing for elections. Officials from the Uruguayan Electoral Court have announced that the final results from the presidential election Sunday will be released the following day. According to recent polls, the election will likely go into a second-round runoff between ruling party candidate Tabadé Vázquez and his right-wing rival Luis Lacalle. Vázquez is the front-runner in the first round. Polls show him with 43% support compared to 30% for Lacalle. A win by Vázquez would extend the left-leaning Broad Front Party's rule to a third consecutive term. Vázquez recently traveled to Argentina, where more than 100,000 Uruguayans live in Buenos Aires, which actually makes that Argentinian city an important electoral district for Uruguay. And in Mexico, the search for the 43 missing students continues to intensify, and more groups and organizations have become involved. Many speculate that the bodies of the students were put in a mass grave and burnt to ashes. Here's more on that pervasive theory from our correspondent Clayton Kahn.
Today in the region known as the Montaña in the Mexican state of Guerrero, indigenous community police brigades blocked roads in protest of what they say is the state and federal government's slow response in finding the missing 43 Ayotzinapa students. This comes after Mexico's Attorney General Jesus Murillo Caram and the Interior Minister Miguel Ángel Osorio Chong had a private meeting with family and classmates of the disappeared in the resort beach town of Acapulco. The federal authorities admitted that they had few leads and advances in their investigation. Meanwhile, a prominent human rights defender and priest, Alejandro Solalinde, says that he heard testimony from various witnesses that declared that the missing students were kidnapped, doused in gasoline, and burned alive. Solalinde is due to give his declaration to authorities this Thursday.
Thanks to Clayton. Violence in Honduras continues to affect every sector of society. Despite the creation of a special anti-crime unit, the brutal gang Maras continue to operate with impunity. Our correspondent Gerardo Torres explains how these groups function outside of the law.
This year, more than 100 bus drivers have been killed in Honduras, according to the National Human Rights Commissioner. This means that every 5 days, a bus driver is killed. A year ago, the government created the National Anti-Extortion Force as a joint police and military effort. They have received 927 complaints, and they have arrested 436 persons related to this crime, but only half are actually jailed.
Public transportation is one of the most affected by extortion. We have received many denunciations, and we have started an investigation in each case. This investigation could last from 48 hours to 1 year. But not all murders against bus drivers have to do with extortion. In some cases, the victims are related to drug trafficking.
There is no data regarding how many are actually victims of extortion from those authorities assure were related to drugs. Bus drivers in Tegucigalpa, that is the city with the highest rate of extortions, have only 3 options: pay the tax from their own pockets, lose their jobs with which they maintain their families, or take the risk of being murdered. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
And thanks to Gerardo, the UN General Assembly has elected the Andean country of Bolivia as one of the 47 members of the Human Rights Council. As our correspondent David Doherty reports, Bolivia was part of 15 members recently elected for a 3-year term to begin in 2015.
The plurinational state of Bolivia was voted into the United Nations Human Rights Council. Bolivia will fill one of 3 spaces on the council dedicated to the Latin America and Caribbean region. The other 2 countries from the region voted in were El Salvador and Paraguay. Bolivia was elected with 144 votes, more than 2/3 of the UN General Assembly. Bolivia's UN ambassador, Sacha Llorenti, himself a former human rights defender in Bolivia, says that the decision reflects a broader international recognition of Bolivia's dedication to human rights. He specifically highlighted the country's new 2009 constitution, approved by popular referendum, which includes a number of constitutional guarantees to human rights. Bolivia will occupy the post from 2015 to 2017. Reporting from La Paz, David Doherty, Telesur.
And thanks to David. Moving on, unsanitary conditions and low financial resources have affected the country of Sierra Leone's ability to effectively fight against the deadly Ebola outbreak. Telesur visited the Makeni area in the Mombali district. That's Sierra Leone's second most affected city by the disease, only after Freetown. Take a look.
This is Maribente Hospital, one of the most important hospitals of Makeni, known in the whole sub-region due to its maternity and pediatric service quality. And she is Viviana Granova, responsible for the center's finance.
We will take the train to downtown.
The hospital was closed after 9 nurses were infected.
Mujeres
Little by little, the hospital soon opened.
This is the plan. Along with British engineers, other treatment centers are being built. However, rainy seasons is complicating the process and the beds are needed right away.
This was the part of the hospital destined for child malnutrition, but on 10 days we have 100 beds to treat Ebola patients.
The idea is to work based on regular diseases like malaria, typhoid and others apart from Ebola and assist being sure that there will not be another contagious nor sources of infections to others.
The hospital maternity unit is not yet fully operational. After it got closed, we started the remodeling. Nonetheless, around 60 pregnant women are already being received daily. During this rainy season, the hospital couldn't maintain the media of 1,000 sick children per month before Ebola, and Viviana wonders what happened to them.
This is the plan. Along with British engineers, other treatment centers are being built. However, rainy season is complicating the process, and the beds are needed right away.
Locals and the neighbors previously trained make heroic work in Ebola community centers like this. However, the country conditions make their work harder.
Moving on to the Middle East now. According to reports, Kurdish forces faced fierce new attacks launched Tuesday by the Islamic State militants. The extremists attempted to block the border with Turkey before reinforcements arrived and pushed them back. New reports indicate that the ISIS militants have obtained at least one bundle of weapons airdropped by U.S. forces that were meant for Kurdish fighters. U.S. leaders confirmed that their forces dropped 27 bundles of small arms, ammunition, and medical supplies intended for the Kurdish fighters. There is also photos and video that confirm that Islamic State militants are using tents and other humanitarian aid intended for Syrian civilians in dire need. Republican senators in the U.S. back the White House's decision to arm Syrian Kurds, but they are also insisting that ground troops are required to effectively combat the Islamic State group. Arizona Senator John McCain has gone even further by urging U.S. lawmakers to immediately deploy U.S. Special Forces and military advisors on the ground to direct the U.S.-led offensive. Meanwhile, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says that Kurdish forces are in control of the majority of the Syrian city of Kobani, despite efforts by the Islamic State extremists. Despite the ceasefire agreement signed nearly 2 months ago, allegations of Israeli forces violating Palestinian rights persist. Our correspondent in Palestine, Noor Harazin, breaks down the claims.
7 weeks has passed since the Palestinians and Israel had agreed on a ceasefire, ending the dreadful 51 days of the Israeli offensive on the Gaza Strip that left more than 2,150 Palestinians killed, most of them civilians, and 73 on the Israeli side. However, since the ceasefire agreement came into effect, Israel has violated this truce with several attacks on fishermen, also with some invasions in the areas of East Gaza City. At the same time, Israel did not keep its word regarding easing the siege on the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Palestinian officials stated that Israeli and Palestinian negotiators are to resume talks on a durable Gaza ceasefire next week in the Egyptian city of Cairo.
Since the ceasefire, nothing changed on the ground except stopping the air raids, but nothing changed regarding letting materials into Gaza, fully opening the borders, lifting the siege,
The two sides last month held their first Egyptian-mediated negotiations since the end in August of their devastating 51-day war in Gaza and agreed to schedule new talks for the last week of October. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
And thanks to Noor, Hong Kong government officials and student leaders have failed to agree on how the city should elect its leader in 2017. Thousands of pro-democracy protesters awaited the results of the meeting between government and student representatives. The two groups discussed potential constitutional reforms and universal suffrage in the next elections. And we end in France, where the official unveiling of the Louis Vuitton Foundation kicks off a busy art week in Paris. The week will be ended by the reopening of the Picasso Museum after an extensive 5-year renovation. At a cost of nearly $143 million, the peculiar and very futuristic structure emerges from the edge of Paris like a giant ship. Its transparent cloud of 12 glass sails billows around the Louis Vuitton Foundation, which sits above a sunken lake. The Modern Art Museum was designed by American architect Frank Gehry, who says he was inspired by the idea of movement. We have plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.